Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part 2, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back with another new year. It is 2014 as we rapidly approach present day. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing this week?
Doing really well. And it's kind of crazy because, as we declared back in the day, this is actually our penultimate week of full histories. Because
Yes.
2015 will be the last year we try to do an actual history of all the stuff going on. After that, probably we'll do a quick summary of top grossing movies or top grossing movie, big events, whatever, but a few minutes instead of an episode on the thing, because we really can't do a lot of the stuff we've been doing as far as the rookie of the years and all that sort of stuff, or things that would let us kind of know what the really important comics that were done in a particular year is much worth, that sort of thing. So,
Right.
Yeah.
But that is coming soon. For now, we have our regular episode. So, yeah, we've got... I'm very curious to see what 2014 looks like. So why don't we just dive in and let's talk about the year in comics. The year in comics. All right, Dan, where do we start? What big picture it for us? What does 2014 look like?
2014 is pretty cool. I saw some sales figures that had not been achieved in decades. Saw some things done by some of the other companies outside of Marvel and DC that had not been accomplished in decades. Pop culture is filled with comic book related movies and merchandise and energy. Marvel is dominant again after taking a couple of years where they got a little bit down in the rankings. They stormed back this year. DC as well is there, and the two of them again are now back over or around 70% of the total market share, at least in comic shops. We're going to see that outside of comic shops, there's a couple of juggernauts that start appearing, which are going to in many ways dwarf what's going on in the actual Marvel and DC world. But those are kind of oftentimes forgotten by the folks actually in the industry. So,
gotcha. All right, so let's talk about movies and TV to start. What was this a big year as far as adaptations?
Colossal. Like comic book juggernaut type of numbers as far as the year. And it's coming from all over the place. There's tons of TV shows on right now, like the Arrowverse on the CW is going strong with all of these various shows, Legends of Tomorrow and The Flash and Arrow and all this sort of stuff. Marvel and DC are both doing a ton of animated direct-to-video releases. This year there were 10 of them. Marvel has a Marvel Universe TV slot on one of the, I don't know if it's Nick or XD or something like this, where they are doing multiple different animated TV shows. You've got things like Stan Lee's Mighty Seven Beginnings, which is an animated TV movie that was intended to sort of kick off an entire new Stan Lee universe of comic properties. There's a bunch of direct-to-video things that are coming out that are not from Marvel and DC, like The Clockwork Girl, which is an animated feature based on a graphic novel series, actually starred Carrie-Anne Moss as the voice. This is from a book from Arcana Studios, created by Sean O'Reilly and Kevin Hanna. There's something called Shockwave Darkside, which is based on a webcomic and this is something we're going to start seeing more and more, is there are
Oh,
a
I
lot of
bet.
screenwriters out there who got ideas they think are going to be really good. They can't get through the doors at the studios, so instead they end up hiring an artist, publishing a comic either as a self-published option or as something where they do it as a webcomic and the like. And then by now saying, well, it's from a comic property, suddenly they're getting noticed where they wouldn't have before because comics are all the rage, right?
Sure, that
So
makes
there's
sense.
a lot of weird places comics are coming into the market. Another one that was a direct-to-video was The Scribbler. I don't know how this is not more popular, how this ended up going direct-to-video, because the people who are starring in it, and this is not an animated, this is live action, Katie Cassidy, who is from the Arrowverse, Michelle Trachtenberg, Gina Gershon, and Liza Dukshu are all in this. This is like a male geek paradise.
Yes, I mean those names were pretty big right around that time,
Yes.
on TV and just getting into movies and stuff.
This must be absolutely horrific to have not done more than it did, considering the cast.
Sure.
So I'm intrigued to see it now. I'm going to have to track it down and watch it. But this was created by Dan Scheffer originally and was published by Image, kind of under their Malibu imprint. So yeah, but did not get a release. Of the ones that did get a release, the worst performing was Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. This is the second Robert Rodriguez Frank Miller collaboration. A lot of the cast came back from the first one.
Yeah.
It was pretty awful. And the budget on it was $65 million. It only brought in $40 million. Wrecked kind of the franchise as far as there'd been plans for a third Sin City and all this sort of stuff, and all that just kind of went away. So
I remember. I think I remember seeing it, and I think I kind of left the theater sort of confused by it. Like the story is all over the place.
It's not terrible, but again, it's got a lot of different vignettes and things like this. It's still visually striking, but
Yes.
as far as an actual movie, it's lacking. We had I Frankenstein, I should say. This had a $65 million budget, essentially bombed because it brought in 77, which means it could bring back its money. This also had a bunch of big names in it, like Aaron Eckhart, Strahovski, who was the main female character in Chuck, was in this.
Yes.
And this, again, was one of those digital-only books that was created by somebody named Kevin Graveau. So he published it online, digitally, got it picked up, turned into a movie, did not do particularly well. Then we had things that started to make some money. There was a movie starring The Rock called Hercules, $100 million budget, brought in $245 million. It did have a bit of a scandal, as usual. Alan Moore was angry at the industry, right?
Don't stop us if you've heard this one.
Exactly. The person who originally wrote the graphic novel that Hercules is based off of was a guy named Steve Moore, who, although he did option the film off before he died, he then died and actually wanted to be uncredited because he believed that the changes that were made to the script and the movie afterwards by the production company essentially made it that he just wanted to not be involved at all. They instead actually did go in and credit him anyway, and Alan Moore then essentially believed this was some sort of publicity done, sort of taking advantage of his dead friend. So he went out on yet another Alan Moore rampage, which I love. I think that's awesome. But then we get to the bigger ones. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the most recent version of this came out. This is live action, starring Megan Fox and Will Arnett. $150 million budget, made almost 500, or grossed almost 500 at $485 million. This is the highest grossing turtle movie of all time, as a note. It is also critically savaged. It's a terrible, terrible movie in an awful lot of ways. Critics love to hate Megan Fox movies. This is also produced by Michael Bay and has a lot of very Bayesian elements to it.
Sure.
Which, as we know, Michael Bay is very polarizing. Audiences love him and critics hate him, is what ends up a lot of times, you know?
Yeah.
I sort of sometimes side with the critics and I sometimes side with the audiences, but I understand both of their viewpoints. And this is kind of if you think of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Michael Bay attached, this would be what you would
Sure,
right?
sure.
We also had Big Hero 6, $165 million budget, $650 million it brought in. This is a Marvel-based comic, or a comic published by Marvel, that's not really in the Marvel universe. It was created originally by Stephen T. Seagal and a guy named Duncan Rolu, who's one of my favorite artists of the early 21st century. He did a Metal Man series I absolutely adore. He's just got a fantastic style. But this ended up then being an animated movie that made a ton of money, lots of merchandising, people love it. It came out through Disney, and really this is, I think, a movie that I enjoyed an awful lot. I took the kids to this. Ben would have been, 10 years old when this came out, so he was right in the age bracket.
The prime age for that.
This would have been perfect. But so again, $650 million on this, $485 on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which means that they are the 5th and 6th highest grossing comic book movies of the year, each making about $500 million.
Wow. Then we had some gangbuster top fives.
Ahead of them, we had Captain America Winter Soldier, $175 million, made $700 with the Russos, Evans, Johansson. We watched this, of course, and reviewed it back when we were doing our MCU review. I know you liked this one a lot. This was one of your favorites. Very
good movie. Yeah, yep. This is one that I missed first time around, but coming back to it after Avengers Endgame and seeing it then, just a fantastic film.
Yep, really is. We then had it, which we would both agree is a fantastic film, defeated at the box office by The Amazing Spider-Man 2, $200 million budget, made $717, so a little bit more. This is the second Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone Spider-Man. Generally not considered a great movie, partly because it just had so many weird plot elements and so many things going on. People now really like Andrew Garfield, and so I think this movie is gaining a little bit of retroactive respect. But at the time, it was considered a mess, to the point where there was supposed to be an Amazing Spider-Man number 3, and there's not, because they canceled the franchise after this.
Yeah.
Right?
It's weird that you'd make over $700 million on a $200 million budget and then that not be good enough to keep going on this. And I'm sure the box office numbers aren't the only thing, obviously, but it's just like, but to be fair, like, I'm a big fan of Marvel movies now, or Marvel comic book movies, and I still have not seen either of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies.
They're actually kind of fun. The first one's actually really good, I think. The second one is not so good, but there are good parts of it. There are parts of it that I really enjoyed. So, and obviously, $700 and some million, and it did not immediately have people telling everybody else, don't go see it.
Right.
So, next one up, X-Men: Days of Future Past, our second Sony one in the group. Again, Bryan Singer directed this one. Hugh Jackman, McAvoy, Fassbender, all the rest come back. This is actually the first X-Men film to get an Oscar nod, and it's, I think, one of my favorites of the X-Men films.
It is, I think, my favorite X-Men movie. Like, the first two X-Men movies are really good, but I think I have watched Days of Future Past like probably twice as many times as I've watched the first two X-Men movies. Yep. That's how much I like that film. It is just fantastic. I will just, if I get an opportunity to watch it, I'll just watch it.
Yep. And that, again, $200 million budget, $750 million it brought in. So very successful. I think for me, I like that one. I like the X-Men First Class. I like the original X-Men movie. So any of those would be among my X-Men favorites, but this one I would not argue at as being the best. I'd probably pick the first one actually myself. Really
sure, that's reasonable. Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy, little film you may have seen at some point, along with everyone else in the world. $225 million budget, which was a lot for a film that nobody knew how this was going to work. because nobody had heard of Guardians of the Galaxy outside of real comic nuts. But it turned out to make $775 million. This was, of course, James Gunn, Pratt, Saldana, Batista, all the rest of the cast, everything like this. The breakout star of the animated Racoon. Nobody expected this at all. And I think this is, in fact, where basically everybody goes bananas about comic book movies. Because it appears that you can take anything Marvel has printed in the last 50 years and turn it into a massive franchise, right? So
at that point, that was the thought anyway. And so, like, I remember I did not see this in theaters. I ended up watching it on video after the fact, and I was just blown away by this film. I had never heard of them before, and it's one of my favorite, like, full-on trilogies. James Gunn and that cast put together 3 fantastic films, and it's just great.
Remember exactly where I was in the early part of 2014 when I went in to see this for the first time on opening night here in Fargo, and I had great trepidation about what I was going to see. But what is interesting is there are very few times this has happened, but sort of like when I first watched The Lord of the Rings, literally as soon as they started the score and you started hearing that voiceover about the history of the ring, I'm like, I'm in good hands here. And I never worried. And that was when, for whatever reason, they kicked in the music and Star-Lord kicks the rat, and you just start seeing the vision of what this is going to be. I'm like, oh, this is going to be fantastic, isn't it? And it was. And it was kind of that same thing. Within a few minutes, I just gave into it and said, yeah, okay, James Gunn has figured this out, and absolutely love it. And that does become, obviously, the highest grossing comic book movie of the year in a very impressive year for comic movies, because there are 4 comic movies that make over 700 million at the box office, and 6 of them that make about 500 or more. To put that in context, those 6 superhero films grossed together over $4 billion at the box office. The entire U.S. box office receipts for the movie industry in 2014 were $10.3 billion. So the domestic box office gross
40%.
Obviously, this was world receipts for those movies. But yeah, the world receipts for those movies are equal to 40% of the entire domestic gross of what the United States put out, including those movies within it. So if you look at just how powerful that is, it's a ridiculous slice of the pie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting is that, we look at this as kind of like the age of Marvel, but they had 5 Marvel films that made the top 5 comic book movies of the year, but only 2 of them are Marvel films. One's a Disney film, 2 are Sony films, and then 2 are actually Marvel films.
That is a huge year. I guess I can see why everyone went sort of like in Hollywood went like through the moon for superhero movies after this point.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so let's switch our focus now to the comics. What was going on at DC? What were some of the big things that were going on in comics there this year?
So DC is continuing with all of the stuff it's been doing, but the main thing with them this year that is sort of interesting is they're leaning into their multiverse, partly because they've got Grant Morrison and just let him off the chain to do whatever he wants. So we have something called Multiversity, started up this year by Morrison and a bunch of different artists. And essentially it's 52 different Earths, all sort of coming together and telling different stories and all of this. We also have a bunch of new books coming out. I'm just going to highlight 2 of them. Wonder Woman by Azzarello and Chang. I love Cliff Chang's art. I hate this book. So Wonder Woman by Azzarello, I enjoyed more than I enjoyed Superman by Azzarello, but far less than I enjoyed, say, 100 Bullets by Azzarello. And then we had Gotham Academy, which is, again, DC trying to tap into a younger crowd and a new generation. This is by Fletcher and Cloonan. Again, Becky Cloonan's artwork, really fun stuff. If you think of sort of like a Hogwarts set in Central City, or if you think of Hogwarts set in Gotham City, you get an idea of kind of what Gotham Academy is all about.
Oh, goodness.
So we're right in the middle of sort of Pottermania in America right around this time. And so, great time to bring out a book like this, and it was really successful.
Okay, so what else was DC up to then besides this multiversity that you were talking about?
And other than that, it's mostly still Batman. There's not a whole lot else that I looked at that really was like, this we have to talk about. But man, are there things from other publishers. So, again, I have to leave out a bunch of stuff, but just to note some of the things this year that I reacted to, whether I liked them or didn't. Rick Remender is a brutal writer. And Deadly Class, which is kind of based on some of those ultra-violent Japanese, the classroom of assassins type of stuff. That was interesting. Not really my cup of tea. Southern Bastards by Jason Aaron and Latour. Aaron continues to be able to write some really interesting sort of cultural/historical based type of stories. There's another one. Lumberjanes by Stevenson, Ellis, and others came out. It's kind of this story of a bunch of girls at a summer camp that really was sort of different than anything you'd kind of seen in a long time. Became very successful. Not so much in comic stores, but within trade paperbacks and within other channels, it became a long-time bestseller and continues to be a bestseller. It's one of my daughter's favorite comic series.
Okay. Witches
by Snyder and Jock. Anything basically that Jock draws is worth taking a look at. Rye, which is actually a Valiant book. If you haven't seen a whole lot of Valiant books lately, this one by Kent and Crane came out again this year. Rye is a character that has had numerous iterations over the last God knows how many decades. But this one actually was pretty good. It was a nice reboot. A lot of the Valiant stuff actually is pretty good, but usually it ends up just getting canceled because they never catch kind of enough of a market share. We had a book that we're going to find is really successful for Archie comics, something called Afterlife with Archie, which is basically the Archie gang living in the Walking Dead future. So it's basically zombies have overtaken Archie's world, and him and the gang are still hanging around.
What the heck?
And in actual fact, it's kind of a spoiler for our industry information, but this book becomes the first time ever that Archie has gained the top position on the trade paperback sales chart.
Wow.
Afterlife with Archie Volume 1 becomes the top-selling trade for one or another of the months of 2014 or 2015. We have Trees by Ellis and Jason Howard. Wicked and Divine by Gillen and McKelvey, which this is just absolutely gorgeous. Like, it is so beautiful and so hip. I think we've talked about this before with Phonogram and stuff like this, that these two, when they get together, make stuff that is so cool that you feel you probably wouldn't even be able to read the comic book if they saw you, because they'd take it away from you and go, you are not hip enough to read our work, right?
Sure.
But McKelvey's art in this is just achingly beautiful. I literally go and look up some Wicked and Divine, check out some of these books. They are fantastic. And the story is really, really cool as well. It's got kind of divinities living on Earth and this sort of stuff going on. I love these stories. Went for quite a long time, and it is really good. We had Prophet by Graham Roy and, I'll never get this guy's name, Melangianus, some sort of thing, which was really an interesting story. It's very different, but I liked it. Box Brown, who's done a lot of really cool sort of autobiographical stuff, did an autobiography of Andre the Giant this year. The interesting thing about this, too, is that, so he does the biography here of Andre the Giant. About 2 years ago or so, he came out with another autobiography, this time of Andy Kaufman, the
Oh, okay.
the comedian. So there's this interesting synergy because, of course, Andre the Giant and him are the ones that have that big fight where essentially he pretends that the giant has basically like crippled him or whatever. He goes around with his with a neck brace on for ages and the like. So the two kind of are a bookend, but he's really good. I would recommend anything by Box Brown, basically. Similarly, we had Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley, which is a story of a woman who opens a restaurant and finds there's like some sort of genie or whatever that can allow her to go back in time and change the past. But she starts overusing that power and causing problems, and it's kind of one of those time travel gone wrong type of stories.
Sure.
Really, really beautiful art, fun stuff, and just an interesting story. Then we have the Juggernaut of the Year, a little book called Sisters. It's by Raina Tegelmeier. This barely even made a ripple in the direct market because it was essentially a graphic novel, a standalone graphic novel, written essentially as a mid-grade comic for girls. Something that the comic industry essentially figures is complete poison as far as any sort of profitability, which is why it spent at least 117 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It probably is the best-selling comic book, I think. It and a couple of other Tegelmeyers, some of the best-selling comic books of the 21st century. It's her and essentially Dogman, the Dav Pilkey stuff, are really the only ones that even they're in their own category, and
right.
Everything else is behind. But so that came out this year, was absolutely just showered with accolades, and it also made a ton of money, which is always good to see. We got The Fade Out by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, which is another of the sort of criminal type of noir stories. I absolutely loved The Fade Out. Fantastic stuff. We got Hip Hop Family Tree. This is a book that there's a couple of different volumes of it. This was volume 2 by Ed Piskor, which is going to win an Eisner Award. This one, Summer, by Jillian and Mariko Tamaki. They're actually cousins who got together. One of them wrote it, one drew it, and it's also going to win an Eisner. It's again something that's sort of more of a graphic novel for girls or young women. And then we had something called Arsene Schwanen by Arsene Schwanen, which is like no comic I can describe, but it's
okay.
It's an interesting one. I think I finished it. I can't remember. But again, a really good, solid year of comic stuff. Like
that is a lot of things, and to think that's just a small fraction of what came out this year.
Yeah, because obviously we're not talking about manga, which is becoming a much larger portion of the comics world now. Part of the reason we don't talk about that is I really don't understand it well enough to give any kind of analysis that makes sense. So I'm just going to say you're going to need to find somebody else for that. And
sure.
We also there's more and more things that are being put into the Scholastic channel and for young people. A lot of those used to actually be comic books. Now they're being published as like Danny Dragon Breath and things like this that are comics that are bound into book form and sold in bookstores and through schools and the like, because the direct market really just is not an appropriate sort of delivery mechanism for them.
Right.
So we're also not talking about a lot of that. And then you've got the drawn and quarterly stuff and a lot of the more high-end sort of boutique comic market, a lot of which, again, didn't really intrigue me. But if you ask, what's the top 20 books of the year, there are folks who are big fans of Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly who would give you 20 comics, none of which are on this list, except probably Arsene Schwanen, because they're going to love that one, right?
Sure.
So if you're one of those folks, feel free to send me an angry letter. I've been waiting for one for 40 years now. I assumed I'd be in trouble long ago.
All right, so let's talk about the industry, and so what sort of sales are we looking at for the year for comic books?
Sales are good. Direct market is up 4.4% to $540 million. Total print market, including all of the other channels, is up 7% to 835. Digital goes up again 11% and crosses the $100 million mark. So again, digital is about 12-13% of the total market, which I think that is one thing that has surprised me, is how quickly the digital market had become that big.
Yeah.
We had Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 1 from Marvel actually sell 550,000 copies. This is the biggest selling comic in decades. If you haven't had anything hit that in a while, part of this was due to the fact they published 48 variant covers for this stupid thing.
What? Are you serious?
For almost 50 different covers for one comic book. So there probably are people out there who bought one of each. I'm not sure who, but in any case, it meant for a lot of comic books.
I can't even imagine like the idea of, okay, we're going to roll out a new Spider-Man. We want to commission a bunch of variant covers. I know, let's commission like almost 50 of them.
Well, then what they would do is a lot of them would be like 1 in 20 incentives, or 1 in 30, or 1 in 50, 1 in 100, which would mean that if the store bought 20 copies, they would get this incentive cover for free. If they bought 50 copies, they'd get the incentive 10, the incentive 20, and the incentive 50 for free. If they buy 100, then they get an incentive 100 plus those others. Because of this, in many cases, because there were people willing to pay for that 1 in 100 because it was a very limited print run, many of them would buy the 100 copies, knowing that even though they're going to have to eat maybe 50 of them, they're going to make enough money on that 1 in 100 incentive that it will allow them to basically just bin 20 or 30 copies of it if they need to and still make a good profit.
That is crazy.
How many of these 550,000 that were sold to stores actually went into the hands of actual fans? That's questionable.
Right.
Nonetheless, DC also had some good sales doing what are called lenticular covers for a Future's End series that they did. Essentially what these are, if you think of those sort of almost like holographic things, where if you look at the thing from a different angle, you'll see a different picture. That's what these were. And they look pretty cool. I've got most of them, and I like them. I did not want to pay for them, nor did I pay for them. I got them in a lot from somebody else at a later point.
Sure.
But nonetheless, they were pretty neat. All of the top 13 books in the direct sales market, top 13 individual issues, were from Marvel this year. So Marvel, again, came back pretty dominant. Image, though, did take over 10% of the market share for the first time since the 90s. So we have Marvel and DC at about 70, Image at about 10, which means that outside of those three, the entire rest of the comic market is under 20%.
Yeah. Wow. That is a big fish and then a very small pond.
Two big fishes. One nervous, middle-sized fish, and a bunch of tiny minnows. Yep.
Yes, exactly. Then you mentioned Archie being the top-selling graphic novel.
Correct.
It's crazy. All right, so what about publishers? Did we have any new ones or any that folded this year?
We had one new one that started, none that ended, and one that was murdered. So, starting from the beginning, Lionforge, which ended up publishing like 400 books before it was folded into Oni Press, was founded kind of on the idea of having diverse creators, diverse topics, doing things that were sort of in different cultures and cultural environments. And they had a lot of cool books that they brought out over the years. Eventually, they did end up sort of being bought out and absorbed. But nonetheless, had a pretty good run. 400 books is a solid number for a publisher. No major publishers actually ended this year, which is a sign of the overall strength of things and the fact that really market consolidation and some of the previous hard times had just really killed an awful lot of the smaller ones. So we haven't got any ones that have built up to major status again, where they'd be noticed if they died. And then we have the murder, which is Amazon, seeing the popularity of comics and digital comics, decided to buy Comixology, which was a website that had a number of contracts with various publishers to sell digital copies of comic books or to allow a subscription, which would then let you read a certain group of comics online for no additional cost if you had the subscription. And Amazon bought them, promising to just keep making it better and there'd be no changes that would hurt anything. And then over the next 2 years, they strangled it until it died. And so Comixology still kind of exists as a small imprint within the Amazon world, but it no longer is anywhere near the actual useful tool that it was before. We now have something called Global Comics, which is starting to take that role and come back up to being something in the same area of what Comixology was, which I assume means that Amazon is going to buy them sometime soon and destroy it as well. But for a long time, it looked like digital comics were really on the upswing. And this is the year when basically they got kneecapped.
I was going to say, this ended up being a huge setback.
Yes, absolutely. I think we would see a very different comic world, a landscape as far as digital comics right now, if this event had not happened.
So you have an interesting note about a judgment.
Yeah.
Court case this year.
We talk about our beginnings and endings. This is an ending that has been in the works for 40 years or more. Ever since he started at Marvel, really, or since Marvel started getting popular at all, Jack Kirby has been unhappy about the way that Marvel has handled the treatment of creators' rights and his sort of role in creating a lot of the characters in the Marvel Universe. Right up until he died, he kept fighting to try and get either the characters back or at least better credit, where he is credited not only as a creator, but also as the primary writer of most of the stories of the early Marvel Universe that he worked on with Stan Lee. This year, finally, after decades, the estate of Jack Kirby actually reached a settlement with Marvel, allowing Marvel to essentially continue to use all the characters with no further lawsuits, and where Kirby's name is going to be more prominently credited on a lot of things. And that's why now most of the time when you do see a Marvel movie with, the Captain Americas, the Fantastic Four, any of these sorts of things, Jack Kirby's name is going to be pride of place in terms of the creators on it. But it took a long time. Really, this came down to sort of like with DC in the late 70s when the Superman movie was coming out, and they just didn't want the bad press because they wanted the good vibes to continue. Mm-hmm. Marvel's realizing that they're coming into a period where they're going to make unbelievable amounts of money, and the only thing that could really screw it up is Jack Kirby's family finding a judge that says, he should really own all these billions of dollars, not you. And then it would all go to heck. And when you got this many dollars, it's also something where a lot of the companies that they're dealing with want the certainty of not investing in something that's going to have a lawsuit attached to it. So I think the Kirby estate did pretty well. Marvel did pretty well. And it just sort of got this out of the way so that they could continue to make the massive dollars that are coming in through the movie industry right now.
Right. So before we move on to the Eisners, you do have a notable passing here.
Yep, we'll have a couple with Marvel too, but as far as sort of industry, the biggest one for this year that I wanted to just note is Al Feldstein, one of the last remaining of the big group over at EC and Mad Comics, actually passed away at age 88 this year. And Feldstein was another of those guys that he was just absolutely an iconoclast, and he was hilarious, and comics were so much better when he was making them. So, yeah.
All right. Let's move on and let's talk about the Eisners now. This is getting to be a big list. What were some of the things that you wanted to highlight here as far as the best of the best for 2014?
There's a couple just that are odd. We had a short story, When the Darkness Presses, by Emily Carroll, which was actually an online comic that was noted for best short story. Best single issue was an Evan Dorkin and Jill Thompson story called Beasts of Burden, Hunters and Gatherers. That's from Dark Horse. So the first two came from smaller publishers. Best continuing series, Saga wins that, no surprise. Best limited series, Little Nemo Returned to Slumberland by Eric Shanauer and Gabriel Rodriguez. Shanauer had been doing Age of Bronze for a long time. He's a really good writer. Does a lot of stuff that is sort of historically based in the like. So going back to an older character like Little Nemo was probably on brand for him. I have not read this story, but evidently it was pretty good because it won Best Limited Series.
Sure.
Best New Series, Lumberjanes. Best Digital or Webcomic, The Private Eye, which I really enjoyed those. Best Reality-Based Work, again, it's that Hip Hop Family Tree. Best Graphic Album is This One Summer by the Tamakis, who are not, I guess, we should call them Marika Tamaki and Jillian Tamaki because they're not that closely related, so they are not a pair. Through the Woods was the graphic album reprint. As far as the best individual awards, Jean Luen Yang won for Airbender and The Shadow Hero. Best Writer-Artist was Raina Tegelmeier for Sisters. Penciler Inker was Fiona Staples, of course from Saga. J.H. Williams wins for Multimedia Artist and Painter. He was doing covers and interiors that were just absolutely astonishing back then. Still does, but his work on Batman, especially back then, was just astounding. Best Cover Artist, Darwin Cook wins. Best Coloring, Dave Stewart. Best Lettering, Stan Sakai of Yusaki Yojimbo. Comics Alliance won for the comic-related periodical. That was a website. And then we had Best Scholarly Work, Graphic Details, Jewish Women's Confessional Comics in Essays and Interviews. I'll note, this is from McFarland, which is a really good press that's done a lot of cool stuff. I will note that this is going to be something that's interesting, is that we are getting to the point in comics journal or comics historian. We're getting to the point in comics historiography where a lot of the big biographies are done, where a lot of the big overarching histories are done. And now a lot of the best work that's going to come out for the next while is going to be compartmentalized looks at particular times or gender studies, race studies, studies that are based on some sort of a smaller segment that's really dug into instead of, history of comics or whatever.
Right.
Because we will see in just the last few years there have been a lot of them that have been coming out, or a couple that have come out, that have sort of, again, done the more synthetic work. But you're going to note for the next decade here, at least the next half decade, there's an awful lot of stuff that's just sort of trying to really dig into these very small corners of comics, find cool things, and then analyze them. And so this is a good example of kind of what's going on there. For the Hall of Fame, John Byrne goes in, Chris Claremont goes in. I'm certain that they couldn't have been happier than to go into the Hall of Fame together, considering they basically hate each other and would kill one another if they were given a chance. Frank Miller goes into the Hall this year, obviously well deserved. And Dennis Kitchen, who's somebody who was one of the most important, not really creators, but more like publishers, because he did the Kitchen Sink Press books that published a lot of Underground and other types of books in the 60s up through the 90s. We had Promising Newcomer Award to Jorge Corona and Greg Smallwood. Smallwood, you might remember his name because he's done stuff on Moon Knight. Bill Finger Award for Excellence in Comic Writing. Don McGregor wins along with John Stanley. And then the Will Eisner Spirit of Comics Retailer Award to Pack Rat Comics. So again, this is one of those where I think the thing about the Retailer Award is showing how even in an age of internet, even as a lot of brick and mortar stores are failing and moving away, The comics industry has decided to just latch into the direct market and brick and mortar and to absolutely say we're going to defend these against all encroachment.
Right.
We might still have blockbusters if the movie industry had decided to care as much about, blockbuster and video stores as these guys care about brick and mortar. And to be quite frank, when you look at what streaming has done to a lot of these studios and everything,
maybe they should have.
Part of me that thinks, comics, there's a lot of problems with the direct market, but it has protected the industry in a lot of ways that other industries have sort of been corrupted by. So, anyway.
All right. Before we talk about Marvel, Dan, what was your favorite non-Marvel comic from 2014?
Wicked and the Divine, without any question. Every month I was waiting for the new one of those to come out. Absolutely love it.
Very nice. All right, let's turn the look at Marvel and see what they were doing in 2014. The year in Marvel.
Excelsior!
All right, so they're back at the top of the heap as far as sales goes. We just had the big sort of we're starting to see them do the kind of the yearly or bi-yearly reboot thing starting now. What kind of year was 2014 for Marvel?
2014, kind of like we talked about, was a pretty fantastic year for Marvel. I'm not talking about the movies and everything else, but within the comic environment. They sold a lot of books. They put out a lot of things that were going to sort of set the stage for a revitalization for the next few years. New titles, new creators, some game-changing stories. This whole Marvel Now era started to come really into full flower for them. And so we're seeing the results of that. And also starting to see, for good or for ill, this new way of managing their titles that Marvel has continued to this day, because there's a lot of things dying in this year.
There is churn.
There's a lot of churn. Yep.
Okay. So total series this year, is it still at about 500 where we were last year?
A little under. We're getting a little bit less again. 489 total titled series. And those can be one-shots, those can be collections, those can be actual ongoings, whatever. Of those, 354 are new, and 337 of them do not continue past this year. So again, that doesn't mean they're canceling 337 things. It just means that those would either be a single shot issue or a collected edition or whatever, or maybe it is a series that gets canceled.
Sure.
It's also hard to not notice that Thor 337 is, of course, the first Walt Simonson Thor. So anytime one sees 337, you have to remember Walt Simonson and the initial Walt Simonson Thor. So
sure. So we've been highlighting the highest numbered issue to release this year. What was that for Marvel?
In January, the highest issue was 700.1 for Amazing Spider-Man.
0.1.
Yeah. I don't know. That's 700.1. After that, the highest issue was issue number 36 for the Avengers in December.
That is ridiculous.
Because 700 was the last issue of Amazing Spider-Man before it was rebooted as Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3.
They had to get to 700 so they could sell the big 700 issue.
Yep. And then after that, it got canceled. Now there's not only, number 36 is the highest currently, but we're seeing a bunch of other stuff that's canceled and then a bunch of new number ones. That also means the best-selling comics are Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 1, Rocket Raccoon, number 1, and Death of Wolverine, number 1. A bunch of new books coming onto the market.
Sure. Okay, so what did we have many event books this year?
There were a bunch of them. The big event is something called Original Sin, where the Watcher is murdered, and then Nick Fury and a cast of other characters have to try and solve the murder. It is okay. It's interesting. I like the story. It's a little weird in the ending. By the end of it, Not to give anything away, but Nick Fury, to do penance for his sins, is forced to become the next Watcher and hang out on the moon and sort of take over the job now that the old Watcher's dead. Death of Wolverine was a 23-issue series that.
I was just going to say, so how many? So Original Sin, it looks like, is 67 titles, and
Yep,
I know
connected.
part of the early part of Volume 4, or what, I don't know what number Daredevil volume we're on now, but the Daredevil gets canceled after 36 and then starts up a new one. Same creative team. Yep. And some of the later issues of that year are actually Original Sin books. I remember the covers of those books.
Yep.
And there's like this one page sort of like, this sort of thing had happened, and it basically completely changed what was going on up until that point. Like, we had like story going, and suddenly we're like, we're in because spoilers, he goes to San Francisco again, and then suddenly he's back in New York, and there's things going on in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's
it can be crazy and a little bit frustrating, and that is when they're intrusive. I don't like it, but that is the way it sometimes happens with these. And going across those 67, I think the actual Original Sin miniseries is like 6 or 7 books, and then the rest of them are that sort of sprinkled throughout the rest of the universe, with just sort of like people popping in or weird changes happening or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not a fan either, because I wasn't reading the main series or had any idea what was going on, and the like 1 or 2 page thing to kind of say, hey, this happened, and now suddenly things are completely different, wasn't enough for me, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It really is.
So what other events then were occurring this year?
We had the trial of Jean Grey. We had Death of Wolverine. We talked about the first issue of that miniseries. That was 23 issues. Across a number of books, kind of around the Avengers X-Men Axis series, which is a bigger crossover that went 56 issues. That's when the Red Skull actually takes over sort of Professor Xavier's mind and uses his mind powers to corrupt people and sort of bring hate to the world and the like.
Oh, goodness. Like hate needs any help.
Yep.
Good grief.
Yep. So that was unfortunate. Spider-Verse, where Morlun, who's a Spidey foe, ends up having to face all the Spider-Men from across all of the various multiverse options. Very much something that kind of presages the Spider-Verse movies. This is the thing that inspired them. It's not the same story, though.
Okay.
And then there's one called Inhumanity, which I don't know if it's technically a crossover, but it really is, because Inhumanity is essentially where the Inhumans, in order to, I can't remember why, but they release these things called the Terrigen Mists onto Earth, and a certain percentage of the Earth population is descended from the Inhumans, and so when the Terrigen Mists are released, they then have their Inhuman powers released. This is where you get Ms. Marvel. This is how Kamala Khan becomes a superhero, is she gets in the Terrigen Mists, and there's going to be others as well. So this becomes essentially a crossover that isn't necessarily treated as a crossover, because there is an Inhumanity miniseries, but then the results of that spiral out into all sorts of different places.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Right. So outside of like the event books and the crossovers and everything going on, what are some of the other things that are happening across the Marvel titles this year?
First off, Peter Parker gets his body back from Doc Ock.
Hey,
so, you remember?
Yes.
The spider. What was it called? The
Superior Spider-Man.
Superior
right?
Spider-Man is no more. The Ultimate Universe continues to face off against Galactus with relatively catastrophic results. Black Widow is actually rebooted with a new number 1. And Phil Noto is the artist on this. I actually love this Black Widow series. We have Loki essentially rebooted or reincarnated as a young version of himself. So he's now like a teenager running around causing trouble instead of an adult running around causing trouble.
Fun.
Magneto was for a while like turned into this guy who was the head of the Xavier Academy, and he was almost like a good guy. He'd been reformed. He goes bad again this year and sort of goes underground. He starts causing trouble a little bit more on a one-to-one basis, though. Rather, he's more like the Magneto that goes around and like kills the Nazis in the bar during the one movie than he is the Magneto that's like trying to blow up the planet or whatever.
Sure.
Jane Foster takes over as Thor. I guess I should say, spoiler alert, Jane Foster takes over as Thor because in the comic you don't actually. There's a new Thor. She's female. It drove everybody crazy because it's like Thor is a name of a person. Why is the new Norse thunder god named Thor? But that's just the way it is. Ask Jason Aaron. He said, just leave me alone. We don't find out what the actual identity of that person is for about a year. But it turns out that actually then is Jane Foster. By the end of this year, just as a note, there are no titles remaining in the Marvel Universe that had started before 2009. So the entire run of Marvel is now essentially less than 5 years old.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is churn. That is it obviously it's a huge departure from where we were, right? Because I mean, I feel like they were celebrating these like big milestones, and they were hit almost yearly. It felt like they were hitting milestones with not just like the company, but like individual titles were hitting milestones in that. And then suddenly now, over the last couple of years, they're just that the big milestone number isn't really the thing anymore. Now it's we go for a little while, we end it, we start over because we can get the big money on the number ones and speculators and that sort of thing.
Absolutely correct. I would agree with that.
Ugh.
And it's a matter too of the fact that they have just decided that it's kind of that whale idea that they're better off extracting a bunch of money from a few people who have decided to be really invested than they are trying to somehow convince actually hundreds of thousands of people to buy on a regular basis, a lesser amount of product.
Right.
And so, and it seems to work because geek culture across all elements has sort of taken on this path over the last decade. Everything from Lego to Magic the Gathering or any of these other things that I am kind of a fan of the fan of the hobby seem to be doing that, coming up with collector boxes and the super expensive limited edition sets and all this sort of stuff.
Yep. So, video games do it as well. It's kind of annoying. All right, so let's talk about some of the notable new series of the 350 some odd new series that we had this year. Is there any, I guess, that like hits 20 or more issues then? Is there anything like that really sort of sticks around for like 2 years?
Absolutely. Nothing goes over 28. That is the new high for everything that we get.
Really?
Amazing Spider-Man will hit 28. Avengers World 21. Magneto 21. Then you have, but I mean, you just look, it's all the big books. X-Factor, Daredevil, Black Widow, Punisher, Amazing X-Men, Ms. Marvel, Fantastic Four, Loki, Moon Knight, Hulk, Miracle Man, which is a new one. They just get the Miracle Man license a little while ago. Silver Surfer, Captain Marvel, Secret Avengers, X-Force, Invaders, Inhumans, Wolverine. All of these are things that previously would have been books that would go 100, 150 issues. Now they're all going to be kneecapped somewhere in the area of 15 to 20 books, going down to even things like, Thor was 8 issues, Ultimate FF 6 issues, new She-Hulk that only lasted 6 issues, and then another She-Hulk that lasted 12 issues. So
this just seems ridiculous. This just is not.
But if you look at the sales charts, unfortunately, they back this up as a really good idea.
This gets rewarded, yeah.
Because everything that sells really big is a number 1 issue, Except Walking Dead, which keeps having like issue 132 or whatever way at the top. So the other option is to just build a really quality product and make it consistently good. But they don't want to do that. They want the cheap option.
So how does this work with regards to like trade paperbacks then? How do they collect these? Do they just
by name? So each one of them will have kind of a subtitled name. And then other than that, it really is frustrating because you have to look inside most of the time and see what it says for what the volume is and what the original publication date is.
Oh, goodness.
So like if you're looking to get Daredevil trade paperbacks all in a row, they normally do not actually go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever based off of that. If you have, this Daredevil would have gone 20 issues, the one that starts in 2014. So it would probably have 4 or 5 trade paperback collections, and they'd be numbered 1 through 5 maybe. But there would not be a numbering that would tell you why these 1 through 5 are earlier or later than the 1 through 5 from the previous one.
Right.
Oh,
that is.
It's
I'm
awful.
Not a fan. I'm not a fan.
Yep.
All right. So, what about limited series? What were some of the notable limited series that came out this year?
Mostly talked about them. Inhumanity, of course. Original Sin. There was that Racoon series by Scotty Young, which was a lot of fun. They decided to capitalize a little bit on the movie coming out. We had Death of Wolverine, which was actually written by
Charles Soule.
Yeah.
Soule.
Death of Wolverine, of course, which was written by Charles Soule, author that I think we both really like.
Yes.
We may talk about him
do.
later on in the podcast. There was something called the Rule Britannica one-shots, which basically there were a bunch of characters created by Marvel UK back in the day. And some of these were characters that had never previously made it to regular Marvel Comics universe. So they got one-shots where they were given a little bit of a run in the regular universe. And then we had Origins 2, which was the second mini-series focusing on sort of James Hewlett and the early years of Wolverine, sort of his pre-Logan days.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, new characters. We haven't seen much in the way of notable new characters recently. There's been 1 or 2, I feel like, in the last 4 or 5 years that were really standouts, like Kamala Khan being one of them. Was this a year where we get another one of those, or is it more of a year where we don't really get anybody new that's of any big consequence?
It's a weird year because there's in actual fact one fantastically important character that is quote unquote introduced this year, right? But we'll get to that. So most of them though are iterations on existing characters.
Sure.
So there's a new Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes comes up, who's going to be an important character, no question. Cindy Moon, whose name is Silk, one of the Spider-Man characters, is introduced this year. She's had a number of series on her own. I think is a pretty decent addition to the Spider-Man universe. So that's a decent character. Angela, who'd been invented in the Spawn universe ages ago by Neil Gaiman and McFarlane, is brought over into the Marvel universe at the end of sort of when the universe was broken and reality was broken last year. She actually gets popped into the Marvel universe during this and is very angry about it. So I think it's at the end of a Guardians of the Galaxy book, actually. She just sort of appears and then Now Angela's in the Marvel Universe. But that not really a new character, just one that
Right.
they've acquired the rights to, much like with Miracle Man. Then we have Jane Foster becoming Thor and then Valkyrie. Again, not a new character, it's just a character that exists taking on a different role. And then probably, without a doubt, the most important actual addition to the Marvel Universe this year is the character we know as Ghost Spider, which is Gwen Stacy from the alternate dimension who becomes her planet's version of Spider-Man, right? So much like in the movie you see, she comes from a reality where her best friend Peter Parker dies, and she is the one that has the spider powers instead. So it's kind of that inverted reality.
Gotcha.
But because she's now become a major part of the Spider-Verse movies and everything else, and a powerful sort of selling force in her own right, I think by far this is the most important character that was created this year.
Yeah,
So,
no, that makes sense.
Yep. And that we
Right.
have Jason Latour and Robbie Rodriguez to thank for in terms of the creation of that.
Gotcha. All right, so ending series, we mentioned Amazing Spider-Man coming to an end when it hit the 700 total. What were some of the other big names that ended up getting canceled and then rebooted sometime during 2014?
So Wolverine and the X-Men made 43 issues. Daredevil, our own friend, made 37, which is frustrating because what issue did it end with?
What issue did it end with?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It ended with issue 36.
Yes.
But that's because it's got that stupid 10.1 issue that goes right in the middle of it.
That's right.
Yep. And so
and-
it technically is
and-
37 issues.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's like if you're reading it on Marvel Unlimited, there's actually at the end of it, after issue 36, they put a 1.5 issue in there after it that I was like, 1.5, when do I read this? Do I go find the next volume, read the first issue, and then come back to this? And it was like, no, I ended up reading it before going on to the 2014 Daredevil, and it was fine because it was actually Daredevil in New York before he moves to San Francisco anyway, and it was actually like 3 stories in one, but it was just like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, that's actually just a standalone book that is between the two volumes that basically is a celebration of Daredevil's 50th anniversary.
Right.
So they celebrated his anniversary by canceling him essentially, and then giving him
Yes.
this little token book to make up for it. But so yeah, he got canceled. Superior Spider-Man actually did get canceled because that concept ended, right?
Right.
Thunderbolts ended at 32 issues. Iron Man at 29. Ultimate Avengers at 26. Thor at 25. Cap at 25. A lot of these books had started about the same time, and then they ended about the same time.
So the thing that I'm noticing just by looking at this is they let a lot more books go 2 years
Yep.
than they did the ones that started this year. Like the amount of time that they let them go before they get canceled and rebooted is getting smaller, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it's because they want to hit the, go back to the ATM and get more money by reprinting a number 1.
Yep, and a lot of times there also are creators that they can get who will sign on for a year, and they've got a story to tell with the character, and then when they're done, instead of just making a new arc, they reboot entirely. Or sometimes, like you were seeing, you even keep the same creators and they just reboot for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, what is this? Like, I
Doesn't make
liked
any
Mark.
sense.
I like Mark Waid. I like Chris Samney now. Like, I got there, and it's like, okay, so it ends. So I'm fully expecting when I bring up the next volume of Daredevil and start reading that it's going to be a new creative team. But no, it's still Mark Waid, it's Chris Samney, and it's like, why are we doing this? Other than we just want a payday.
No particularly good reason. Yep. So, but a lot of things ended. Of the ones that end kind of permanently, Powers which is a Bendis series. There was a series called Bureau that ends. There was a Secret Avengers finished up. Savage Wolverine finished up. A lot of those won't be rebooted. They'll be coming in different ways. It's interesting. There's like 3 or 4 different Wolverine series that end this year. So Scarlet Spider ends and won't come back for a while at least. So.
Right, let's transition. Let's look at the Marvel bullpen this year. So, as far as staff size or the number of creators that got a creative credit this year, what are we looking at as far as that number?
So our man Axel Alonso continues to keep his staff a little lower, or at least number of people getting credits a little lower than previous. 570 people are credited on Marvel books this year. And of that, 105 of them are brand new to the company.
That number went up a little bit, I think.
I think
we were under 100 last year when we talked about new staff.
But a lot of the people do still only do 1 or 2 issues. So the number that actually have a substantial imprint at Marvel over the next decade is still pretty low. Probably 30 or 40 maybe that did more than 10 or 15 books for them.
So before we talk about the Rookie of the Year, though, you have some notable passings as far as Marvel creators this year.
Yeah, 2 people I figure we should know. One is Dick Ayers, who was an artist who worked across comics for a long time. One of the things that, actually something I read noted, was that he was an inker on Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. Ayers penciled and inked all sorts of stuff. Very prolific creator for Marvel and for other folks.
Yeah, I recognize that name.
And then we had Stan Goldberg. So he was actually a colorist who worked for Marvel basically back in the 60s bullpen. It was him and Simic and Kirby and Lee. A lot of these guys were sort of the original Marvel bullpen. And so Goldberg was very, very important to the early years of Marvel. Most of the seminal works of the early 60s, he was the colorist on them. So him and like Rosen would have been the letterer, and he would have been the colorist on it.
That is a big loss. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about Rookie of the Year. So there was 105 creators that got their first credit here. You mentioned that a lot of them are 1 or 2 issue sort of creators. They didn't leave much of a mark. But I'm curious, who were some of the people that actually did make their mark so far with Marvel, and then and got consideration, and then we'll talk about the winner.
Well, and a number of them really are doing cool things in comics, just not for Marvel.
Right.
People like Mitch Gerads, Ryan Brownie, I think actually, Marguerite Bennett, didn't do a lot for Marvel. There's a bunch of other folks too that I noticed their names as I was going through. But we're only looking for Marvel Rookie of the Years. We've got a number of names here that I think would probably have won it in a number of our previous years. Ryan North has done a lot of work, including recently some fantastic runs on Fantastic Four. He also has done just a lot of humor things and other books. Really, really good writer. I like North's stuff a lot. I would have been perfectly confident that he could be a Rookie of the Year in many years. Greg Smallwood, who you might recognize his name, he did some stuff for Moon Knight. Actually, the Lemire Moon Knight. He did some of the interesting art on that stuff.
Yeah.
Russell Dauterman, who not only did the Thor books with Jason Aaron when Jane Foster becomes Thor, he also has done a lot of stuff on Scarlet Witch and has become one of Marvel's key cover artists. Most of what he does is sort of just sexy Scarlet Witch type of covers these days, right? But he's very good at sexy Scarlet Witch covers. And so because of that, he is constantly employed by the company.
Sure.
Jim Zub actually has done a lot of stuff on Conan. He's done a bunch of other books. I really like Zub's work. I think he's a really interesting writer. Also, somebody who's just been very prolific, not just only working with Marvel, but with all sorts of other companies. In fact, a lot of his Conan stuff isn't done for Marvel; it's done for other folks. Chip Zdarsky, going to be our runner-up. Zdarsky's a pretty darn good writer.
I was going to say
artist.
That's a name I know.
Yep, he worked on probably my favorite thing he's done is Howard the Duck. He's a really funny guy, really good at writing comedy, and his Howard the Duck stuff was fantastic. He actually won, I think, a Harvey Award or something. Might have been nominated for Eisner's for his Howard the Duck books. And then also, we're going to see he wrote and worked on Daredevil for a while. So he's going to be on our book in the near future. But I think personally the winner is a pretty clear option for me.
Okay, so who, if it's not North, it's not Smallwood, Dowderman, Zub, or Zdarsky, who is the winner of the Rookie of the Year for 2014?
You may know this name, actually. I think that we've read some stuff by him in various places. Charles Soule actually has been working for Marvel since this year. He started off, as we talked about, working on the Death of Wolverine stuff. He did the She-Hulk series that sort of redefined the character in the mid-2015 or the mid-2010s. He's been writing Star Wars stuff for like a decade, and in fact has become, I think, probably the most important Star Wars writer outside of Lucasfilm, because he's done a fantastic job of just sort of developing the universe. And not only is he writing comics, but actually he's got some of the New Republic novels that Lucasfilm has been bringing out have actually been written by Soule as well. So he's doing novelizations and he's doing comics. And, kind of like with Zdarsky, he also has a run on Daredevil that we're going to be seeing. But
yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite writers of the last couple decades. I like the novels he does. In fact, I probably like his novels better than his comics. He's got a couple of them that are just really, really a lot of fun. And also there's things like Undiscovered Country and a number of other books that he's doing outside of Marvel and the like that really are pretty fantastic as well. So, yeah,
100 Genies, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to meet Charles Soule at Phoenix Fan Fusion. Got some autographs. I have all 4 volume collected works of Undiscovered Country. I haven't finished reading them, but I'm in the middle of those. 100 Genies as well.
8 billion genies.
Yes, that's right. 8 billion genies.
Mm-hmm. And by the way,
one for every person on Earth. That's right.
Undiscovered Country is still being published. There are new ones coming out. So you're not done.
Well,
There's
yes.
more to find.
More to
find. There are cool. undiscovered countries.
There is. Yes, so. Exactly. That makes perfect sense. I think that is a great call. I'm very, very happy with this choice as well. Charles Soule, you are our rookie of the year for 2014. Congratulations. Dan, we're running a bit long, but before we go, Marvel, your favorite Marvel comic from 2014.
It has to be Thor by Aaron and Dowderman. I really enjoyed those books. It was a cool story where Thor is sort of, again, he's kind of lost his way. He's lost his title and everything else. He's doing his own thing. These stories have a lot of depth to them as they move along, and kind of when you find out what's going on with Jane Foster and everything, the art is absolutely just phenomenal. All the Thor stuff, basically, for most of this time period is fantastic. But these I really liked.
I'm thinking I read some of these as we were getting ready for one of the Thor movies, didn't I?
Absolutely, you would have. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely am a big fan of Jason Aaron doing Thor, so I totally get why that would be a favorite for this year. All right, and with that, I think we've got it covered. The first half, at least, of 2014. We've got another week, Daredevil, coming up next week. But for now, that's going to put a wrap on this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. Did Dan miss your favorite comic of 2014? Let us know. Tell us what it is. We want to share what you thought was the best of 2014 in a future episode. You can send us those comments via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. We're on Blue Sky at Comics Overtime there. Dan, this was another big year. The movie list is absolutely crazy, and it's hard to remember just how big a year this was as far as comic book movies, but this was a huge year. And, next week we get together, we get to talk about the end of another volume of Daredevil, the start of another volume of Daredevil. We get another limited series. We get a one-shot that's somewhere in the middle of all that.
Yes.
I counted for next week's episode, we're going to be covering 22 books, basically. So that is
insane.
That is a lot of that is a lot, and like all of those have Daredevil in the name. So
yes.
They're like, and there probably is others. We've only got so much so much time and so much we can cover.
And it's going to be, I'm interested to see, because the two non-Daredevil series are very different, and I'm intrigued to see which one you like better. In fact, I already know which one you like better because you've declared on this, but I'm interested to see what you think of each of these and how it all goes. So
if you're curious about all that, tune in next week. But until then, take care, everybody.
See you later, folks.